Some of you may know that I did something that raised a lot of eyebrows a few years ago. I bought two girls from their brothels. One was this girl, Strainette, and this one in the white blouse, Stray Mum. I got receipts when I bought them. $150 for one, just over $200 for the other. When you get a receipt for buying a human being in the 21st century, that should just be a shame on all of us. A second issue that, to me, seems as if it should be very high on the agenda is maternal health, reproductive health. There are many ways into this, many aspects of this. For me, one of the most poignant is obstetric fistula, which I think is just about the worst thing that can happen to a person. As I'm sure many of you know about fistulas, they typically happen to a teenage girl, often whose pelvis isn't fully formed. The baby's head gets stuck as it's coming out. There's no doctor around. She suffers internal injuries. She typically is left incontinent. She's leaking waste, dribbling waste. She can't control it. She smells. Often she also has something called foot drop, nerve damage in the legs that leave her unable to walk. She's, 15 years old or something. It's what happened to this girl, now she's a woman, Mahabuba Mohammed. Mahabuba is an Ethiopian. At age 13, she was married off to a man of about 60. She gave birth alone at age 14 in the bush. No doctor, baby got stuck, baby died. She suffered a fistula because she was stinking, because she was dribbling waste. The village thought that she was cursed. They put her in a hut at the edge of the village and took the door off so the hyenas would get her at night. She's 14 years old. She's also just unbelievably courageous, unbelievable young woman. There was a stick in the hut. When the hyenas came, she waved it around her head, shouted at them all night long, fended them off. When dawn came, she had bilateral foot drop. She couldn't walk. She set off crawling to a village 30-some miles away where there was an American missionary, thinking that was her only hope. She obviously couldn't crawl that far in a day. When night came, she hauled herself into a tree, and so the hyenas wouldn't get her. Unbelievable woman. Next morning, set off again, and finally arrived half dead on this missionary's doorstep. And he could immediately tell from the smell that she had a fistula. Took her to the Addis Ababa Fistula Hospital, where she got a $300 surgery, $300 repair of that fistula, and by an American doctor, Steve Arrowsmith. And while she was recovering, the staff noticed that she was incredibly bright, incredibly able. They asked her to help out. And she's now a nurse at that hospital. Just a wonderful example of taking somebody who is otherwise a squandered asset and turning her into somebody who is truly a productive benefit to the community, to the country. And another way of underscoring this isn't just a tragedy, although it surely is that, but also a real opportunity. Another area that is important is to give young women a capacity to generate income. And microfinance is obviously important in that. I think it's also important to not forget micro savings as well as micro lending. This is a woman called Saima Mohammed. I met her outside Lahore in Pakistan, and she was married off to a man who was a bit of a loser, frankly. He was a gambler. He was unemployed and pretty much unemployable. And Sima had, he took out his frustrations by beating Sima each afternoon. Then she had 2 daughters, one daughter after the other. And he thought, she's just giving me girls. I want a son. So he and his mother began to talk about how he might get a second wife. Sima was just beside herself. And at that point, she got a loan through a microfinance organization called Cash to start a little and help starting an embroidery business. And she's turned out to be an amazingly shrewd businesswoman and amazingly good at embroidery. And so she began to take her embroidery to the markets in Lahore, and they could take everything she produced. They asked her for more. She began to hire the neighbors to produce embroidery under her direction. Pretty soon she hired 3 dozen other people in her community. She was the biggest employer in the village, making embroidery and shipping it to Lahore. And so at that point she needed somebody to actually transport it. So she hired her husband. He began to have a whole new perspective on female empowerment. She then, as some of the research on how people spend money might suggest, she's very much focused her income on her kids, on her daughters. And her eldest daughter is, when I met her, was first in her class because of the tutoring, because of the way Sima was really trying to target that money on education. Speaking of education, there's no silver bullet in development. Helping people is harder than it looks. But increasingly I've come to believe that maybe the area where you get more bang for the buck than anything else, one of the levers that you can use to affect a broad range of other areas in development, from reproductive health to other kinds of health, to financial empowerment, to security, is indeed education. And that in particular you get probably more bang for the buck educating girls than you do educating boys, for a variety of reasons we can talk about later. This is one of my favorite stories in that regard. A girl called Beatrice Bira. She grew up in Uganda. She's 9 years old in this picture, and her parents had not sent her to school because she was a girl. They needed her to stay at home, to fetch firewood, to fetch water, to look after her younger siblings. And then her parents got a goat through the Heifer Project, Heifer International, which I'm sure you know of their model. And they sold the milk from that goat. And with that extra little cash, they decided that now they were actually well enough off, and I think they had a bit of a nudge from Heifer too, that they could send Beatrice to school. And so at age 9, she went. All the other first graders are 6, but she rockets to the top of the class. She truly turns out to be something of a prodigy. All during elementary school, she's at the top of her class. In high school, she begins to do really well in standardized nationwide exams, and becomes finally the first person in her village to go abroad to study. And a couple of years ago, graduates from Connecticut College. That's her graduation. Isn't that cool? And this is her graduation party. While there, she announces that she's the luckiest girl in the world and says, "It's all because of a goat."